essential for project managers. Your presenter today will be Barrett Johannesson, and I will be your host, MJ Niscoda. Before we get into today's webinar, we do have a couple upcoming events for iFormBuilder. On May 11th is going to be our Power User Summit. This is a free event to attend. If you do have time, I highly recommend it. A lot of our power users that have really taken the platform to the next level are going to be coming and presenting and showing how exactly they've used iFormBuilder and how they continue to grow it inside their workflows. Also during that week, we will be offering on-site iFormBuilder certifications happening that Monday and Tuesday. So again, if you would like to learn more about the platform, this is a paid course, but again, we've been doing this for quite a while, and a lot of our attendees have been pulling great value out of it. So again, that will be an on-site, in-person one if you'd like to attend. So that week's full of all sorts of iFormBuilder learning events.
All right. Well, thank you so much, MJ, for that introduction. For those of you who haven't attended one of our webinars before, this webinar is being recorded, and after this session and in the next 48 hours, what we'll do is we'll take this recording and we'll put it on a web page along with the PDF for the presentation, and we'll include some links, and then we'll send you an email letting you know that it's active and you can go listen to it again or share it with others, as well as looking at the presentation, because the presentation that I'm going to share with you, not only is it a great resource to review what we discussed, but it's also going to include some links in there to our help desk articles. So if you're looking to try to implement some of these strategies within your project, then you can get more information that way. Like MJ said, my name's Barrett Johannesson, and I'm very excited for today's session and talking through how to manage your iFormBuilder projects successfully and to make the most out of the project so that you can make your project and deploy it at a faster rate and be very successful, because that's what we want for you. We want you to have a successful project. I've been working with the platform for a little over 3 years now, and I love the ability that iFormBuilder gives you to create these custom projects. But a lot of what comes about when you're talking about deploying these projects is learning the platform, learning the ins and outs, and then creating a workflow that meets your needs with best practices. So for today's session, I want us to go through the basics of projects with iFormBuilder and discuss how we can make the most out of it in a timely and efficient manner. So just in a nutshell, this basic iFormBuilder process, we all should be aware of this, even if you're relatively new. It's the idea of the create, collect, consume, and that the platform, not only is it just the app or just the web portal, it's the two pieces together that make this dynamite solution. So with this process, that first step is the creation. And this is where we're first creating our forms, we're using smart controls, we're learning about the form builder itself, as well as creating our users. That next step was the collect. So this is where we are familiar with who our end users are, and we've launched the project, and we've given them the different permissions for the forms, and then they can access them on their iOS or Android device with or without connection. And after that, it's the fun part where you're taking all this data that has been captured and finding the best way to consume it in sometimes it could be in a dashboard. Other times you may want to view it with a PDF. But every workflow is unique, and it's creating this custom end result where you're able to consume the data in a fast and enlightening manner. So when we come into iFormBuilder, we talk about that solution, and we have this process where we first create those forms, then we create our users, then we assign the users to our forms, they collect the data, and then we manually export the data feeds and views. Most of us, when we start our iFormBuilder projects, this is the workflow that we use. And this is only because we're not as familiar with the platform to start to use some of the best practices. So my goal here is to share with you how to optimize this workflow. So you still have to go through part of those processes where you're creating the forms, you're creating the users, but then it's creating user groups and form groups and then assigning user groups to those form groups, and then the step where the user's collecting their data, that part doesn't change, but then optimizing it in the end where you're automating your workflow by integrating with other systems or using our API or using our post URL. There's another way to optimize. If you still have to do that export, maybe that Excel export, you can use our data filters so that you're only seeing the data that you need to for certain parts. So with this optimized workflow, I'm going to kind of walk you through how to do parts of this, and so that you can start implementing it today. So if you're following along and you're doing this on your computer, then hopefully by the end you will have created your user group and your form groups, and you've assigned them to each other, and then some of these other processes. So you'll notice that right now I'm logging into my dedicated database. If you have a dedicated database, one of the other ways to optimize your workflows I'll discuss in a little bit, but for those of you who are unaware of what a dedicated database is, essentially you have your own custom URL for your organization. So mine is training.iformbuilder.com. And when I log in here, then I'm able to have additional tools to manage my projects successfully within a dedicated database, because I have more flexibility and I'm able to create company profiles. So with this process, I'm assuming that I've already created my forms right now. So I'm on the optimizing of my projects by first I've created my forms, and now I'm creating my users. When creating your users, there's a couple things that I want to point out here. And this is, again, as a project manager, something that you need to be aware of. The first thing is, if at any time you come in and you're under the users tab, add and edit users, and you don't see this new button, the reason you won't see that is because you have run out of usernames for this particular account. So if you need to purchase additional usernames, then you can just let us know at Zerion Software. Or if you have a dedicated database, you may need to just allocate more licenses to this profile. So now that I'm in the add and edit users, the first thing I'm going to do is create a new user. And one of the best practices, and I strongly suggest this to everyone who's a project manager, is for this username, create some sort of naming convention for your users. Maybe have it be the beginning of their email address or their first initial and last name, whatever it may be. Try to follow that throughout your whole account. You don't have to have the username as the full email address. For those of you who have gone through the process of actually creating an account within iFormBuilder for your free and your beta testing, then you would have had to put your whole email address in there. But once you have your account, then you don't need to have the email address as the username. So the next best practice that we have within adding and creating new users is you want to make sure that you're paying attention to the capitalization that you have for this username. I would suggest having it either all uppercase or all lowercase. The reason I mention this is because when we go into our form building, we have these awesome iFormBuilder built-in functions which actually call to these user details that you've placed in here. So the iFormBuilder built-in functions they'll call to the username, the first name, the last name, and email. For the information to be populated for the first and last name, the user will have to log in to the iForm app with the same capitalization that their username was created with. So that's where I say either have it all uppercase or have it all lowercase. If they don't have the same capitalization, they can still log into the iForm app, but some of the built-in functions, if you place them in your forms, it won't populate the user's first and last name. So if you plan on using that, then make sure that you instruct your users on this signing in process. I'll just put MJ's details here. So with this, I'm putting in his first name and his last name. I'll then put in his email address. And the reason I want to make sure I use his email address instead of my own is because if MJ ever needs to reset his password, this email is where the reset password steps are going to be sent to. So if it isn't an accurate email address, or if it's someone else's, then that person would then have to reset the password and then share the password with the user. This next step here is, as I continue, this initial password. As the manager and as the project manager, you have to create this password for the user. And one of the best practices that I have is try to have a standard initial password that you send out to all your users. Maybe it's their first name and then 1, 2, 3 exclamation point. After they've logged into their account for the first time, they can then come in to their account from the web portal and they can update their password under the user's My Profile section. So another best practice here is trying to have the standard password and sending them documentation to then, if you need to, documentations or instructions on how to update their password for security reasons. Underneath this, when we're creating our users, it's so important that we understand the different permissions that we can give a user and what they entail. So for MJ, if I were to just check off the right to create forms, he would be able to log into this account, and under the Forms tab, he would see a form builder. He would be able to create new forms. He would not be able to see any of the other forms that I've created in this account. So he would only see his own, which can be kind of nice with that. If I just check off the company admin permission, then MJ would be able to come in here. He'd be able to add and edit new users. He would see the company tab, so he'd be able to go into the company info in the license section. He would be able to do all the form assignments and create form groups as well as user groups. If I then check off both of these permissions, at that point, MJ will be able to do all the administrative tasks, and he'll be able to create forms and see all of the forms in this profile. So it's actually, this is the permission that I'm currently logged in with this specific username. So he'll have full function within this account. If I just want MJ to be able to collect data on his device and use the iForm app, then I'm not going to check off any of these permissions. I'll leave these blank. So then I'll just click the Create User button, and voila, we're done. While we're on this page, I do want to give you some insight on another best practice that we have as project managers. So when you look at the different users, we have a little status section. And so in this status section, you'll see that right now all my users have this this green check mark. But if I were to come in here and I would see, if I saw that a user had a red icon here, then that indicates to me that that user has tried to log in to the iForm app or into the web portal with an incorrect password over 11 times. And when that happens, they're then locked out of the environment completely. So as an admin, I'd have to come in, select that person's username, and then at that point, a button would appear that would say unlock user, and I'd have to go through that process with them. I'll unlock that username and then reset the password. So one of the best practices is making sure that the user is aware of this standard so that they're not just going through and trying usernames, 20, or they couldn't get up to 20 times, but they continue to try and then they realize they're out of usernames, they're locked out, and then you have to come in here. So making sure they're aware of this so that before they get locked out, they can either log into the web portal and reset their password right away, or they can contact you and you could set up their password for them. I usually tell people that they'll be locked out at 8 or 9 so that they don't go up to the 10th time, and then I just tell them to log in and reset their password right away. And if you're not sure on how to reset your password, just let me jump over here and show you that quickly. So if I had to reset this password, I would go to this main page. I could just put a space bar in, or whenever I put in an incorrect password. At that point, a reset password button will appear, and that's how I would go about with that process. So now that we've added our users, the next best practice that we have here is to create our user group. So under the Users tab, we have the section that says User Group. And you'll notice I already have a large amount of user groups in here, but if you don't, it would be cleared out here in its entirety. So to create a new user group, all you have to do is click the New button. And once in here, you're able to give your user group a name. And one of the best practices that I have, again, is that I use a naming convention and I start each user group with the term group and then do underscore and then whatever this group is. The reason I have this naming convention is because when I go to assign these forms, the user group is going to be located in the same area as all of the individual users. So I want to make my life a little bit easier and to be able to quickly find my user groups if I know that it's in there. So for this user group, I will call it group underscore MJ, and I will choose all the users that I want in this specific user group. And a user can be a part of multiple user groups. And with these user groups, the reason you want to create them is if users are going to be assigned the same forms multiple times or same form, then it's much easier to create one group of all these users and then assign that form or forms to them, instead of having to go down the list and select each individual by itself every time.
Hey Barrett, I have a question.
Sure.
So with this designing these user groups, if someone in the user group had already had access to the form, and then you reassign it within this user group, is that going to, trump anything or kick them out of that form, or are they still going to have access to it?
No, I mean, you could check off the user group and the individual name. That will be fine. They'll still have access to it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Great question. So keep them coming. So now that I've created my user group, I can come in here at any time that I need to and edit these if anything comes up, or I can delete them if I no longer have a use for them. We've created our user group. Let's go ahead and assign our user group to a form. Under Forms tab, I'm just going to go and select an individual form that I see is a parent form, so that's that top layer of a form. I'll highlight that row and click the Assign button. And now that I'm in here, you'll notice I have all of my individual users, but then here are my user groups, and they're all together because of that naming convention. So I see the group that I just added, group underscore MJ, and I'm now able to check off if I want to give that group collect rights and or view rights. So for those who are relatively new to the iFormBuilder platform, when you check off a user for collect rights, that's giving them access to complete the form on the iForm app. If I were to check off the view rights, that's giving them permission to view all of the data captured from the iForm app for this specific form. And they would be able to go under the data tab and view everyone's records, not just their own. Let's say I want this whole group to be able to collect data, but maybe only one or two of these users I want to actually view the data. So I can check off the collect for the whole group and then check the individuals that I want to give the view rights for. With our process of optimizing our workflow, we've now optimized the users because of our user group methods. The next thing I want us to do is optimizing the form assignment process. So this is done by actually creating form groups, and this follows the same setup that we saw when we created our user groups. So under the Forms tab, we'll go down and we'll select the form group. And once in here, you'll see I also have a lot of these. Then I'm going to create a new form group. And because I want to make sure that I'm always matching up the correct user group to the form group, I'm actually going to follow the same exact name for this form group. So when I created the user group, I called it group underscore MJ. So I'm going to do the same thing here. When I create this form group, I only need to assign the top layer of the form, so the parent forms, to my users. So because I set a naming convention, which is also a best practice within form building, I can quickly identify what's that top layer is by seeing the _P. So those are my parent forms. Once I select all of the parent forms that I need in this form group, all I have to do is hit the Create button. And again, I can always come back here, see exactly what forms were assigned to the group, and edit these at any time. But I want to assign my form group to my user group, and so that's also done under Form Assignment. So I go under the Forms tab, go into the Form Assignment, and I'm going to select the form group. And to make my life a little bit easier, I actually want to change the format of this table. So I'm going to click where it says Type, and I'm actually going to click this twice, because then under Type, it's going to bring up all the different form groups that I have. And then I'll find my group _MJ that I just created. And then I'll click the Assign button. And now I'll get my user group that I have here, so group _MJ, and give it collect rights. For those of you who are relatively new to the platform and this is your first time creating a form group, you probably noticed that we don't have the email alert section at the bottom of this page or the post URL section. And that's because the email alert and the post URL has to be configured in the individual form assignment. And it can't be done with the form assignment when you're using form groups. So you have to go into each individual form to set up the email alert and the post URLs, but those can then be part of a form group and then can be assigned through this faster manner. So hopefully you guys have a good idea on how much this can save you time with this assignment process. I'll tell you, for me, the biggest time saver way that I saw is the implementation of the form groups and user groups to be powerful is with training. So if you're unaware, and I know MJ mentioned this earlier, we do offer Form Builder certification. And with our Form Builder certification, I ask that all the participants create an assignment. So they have to create their own form and then share that form with me via a form package. Well, once I import those form packages, if I hadn't created a form group or user group, then I would have had to go into each individual's form and then assign it all at once. And then once I was done reviewing it, I would have to go in and unassign it. So that would end up taking at least 30 clicks to go through that whole process, which could end up taking at least a half an hour. But now with a form group for those certification projects, I was able to take that half an hour and put it down to maybe 3 minutes tops. So it's a big time saver, and I'm able to quickly update those form groups. So if next time someone submits a form, I'm able to add it very quickly and see that in real time. So MJ, before I continue, are there any other questions?
No, Barrett, we're good at this time.
All right. So the next part of the process that I want to make sure that we talk about is one of the pieces when you're building out your projects is you want to optimize your workflow. And one way of optimizing your workflow with the forms is by using our email alerts as well as using our post URL. So when you're assigning forms, we have this email alert section. And what this email alert does is you're able to add one or multiple email addresses so that every time a user completes this form on their device and it's synced to the cloud, the email addresses listed here will receive an HTML version of that record in real time. So it's almost like a notification. They're able to see the data that was captured, and then if there's any action that they have to complete, then they can go ahead and move forward with that project and perform whatever task it is that they have to do. So these email alerts can be extremely powerful and are great as far as notifying other individuals who may be working on the project. So if you wanted to add an email alert, it's just adding the email address. And then one of the newest features that we have is you can actually create a dynamic subject for this email. And so based off of what the user selects in instruction 3 will change what the subject line is. So let's say you're an engineering firm and you have multiple sites. And one of your option lists or fields in your form allows the user to type in what site they're located at. So if you then come into the email alert, you can set it up so that the site name will then be the subject line for this email alert. And whoever receives these emails can then actually filter their emails or search for different topics, whatever it may be, to find the subject for that site. So it's really helpful that way. Underneath the email alert, we have our post data section. Before I go into that post data, I'm just going to talk to you briefly about it. So once we're in the post URL section, this allows us to connect to other web tools. So as a project manager, a lot of times we start our projects where we're going in and going under the data tab and we're just exporting a view or a feed of the data so that we can see it. And maybe we're exporting it in Excel. Then sometimes what we find ourselves doing is we're editing that data in Excel, and then we want to edit it in iFormBuilder, so then we have to go into iFormBuilder and make changes to the data set there. And then maybe we want to hide some of the columns in the Excel. So we're going through this very manual post data capture and cleanse. And that can take a lot of time, and it can, it actually leaves a lot of room for human error. So one way to remove that human error is when we're building our forms, create forms that include smart controls, so we're only getting data that we need. But after we've set up that form in that structure and are finally getting good data, we want to post that data to other web services or other tools so that we don't have to always go into iFormBuilder, pick up the data, download the CSV, and whatnot. So an example of where we'd want to use the post URL is there's web tools for dashboards, so that, let's say, every time this form is completed by a user and the record is synced to the cloud, it goes to Clipfolio, which is a dashboard tool. And I can see in real time the results of this record data. And then if I have to perform an action, then I can do that. Or if someone is coming to inspect my department and see if I'm following every standards, I can show them the results in that dashboard in real time without actually having to go through my files and find the information that they need. Another tool that people are using besides just dashboard tools are we have groups that are using WebMerge, which is a tool that allows you to create a custom PDF and have that PDF attached to an email, and that way you're able to have all the iFormBuilder data that you need pre-populate in that custom PDF and emailed to whomever it needs to go to. So this is where our post URL is a great way to start that automation process. And in this description here, I've kind of mapped out what we see when we go into the post URL and what we need to set up. Here are just some examples where if you are wanting to integrate with like WebMerge or Google or even some other webhooks, those other web tools are going to give you a post URL that you'll then copy and paste it and put it in our post data section for that particular form. We also allow for automation through custom web services. So with iFormBuilder, we have an API available. And if you're a non-developer, then you're probably wondering what API is. But for those of you who are aware of it, it's a way to automate your process and have data flow bidirectionally from iFormBuilder into other databases or other systems and back and forth. So it's a communication system, essentially. This is great once you're able to define your workflow, which is really that first step. Then you're able to work with a developer and create this custom workflow and have it so that option lists are automatically updated. When a trigger happens in your internal system, it'll then update in iFormBuilder or vice versa. It pushes and pulls data back and forth. So it's a great tool when you're ready to automate this process, and if you have a developer in-house. If you don't, we're always happy to help as well. So why would you want to do it? You'd want to integrate data from multiple sources, you want to redefine your workflow, or if you want to have that full task automation. It's so amazing what some groups have been able to do with our API, because they no longer log into the web portal. They no longer have to go into their dedicated database, because that whole process is now automated. For the PDF that I'll share with you, here's just some links to help you get started if that's something that you're interested in. So some other account management tools that we have for you to start simplifying this process is the first thing that I suggest that you do, if you haven't done it yet, is to go under the company profile or company info section of your account and update your company info to make sure it is including the correct time zone. If you plan on connecting, or if you want to connect your Dropbox or Box account, I do suggest doing that so that you can create custom storage paths so your images can be stored for your forms in either Dropbox or Box. By default, it's fine to have it stored in iFormBuilder as well. You can also go in and customize additional features within your project. So if we go up into our company tab and go into company info, this is one of those first steps I suggest that you do, and just coming in, making sure the time zone is accurate. But then you have the client customization, which allows you to change the colors that you see within the iForm app and even include a custom background link. If I scroll down further here, you'll notice I have this email customization and report customization. I think that as a project manager, it's really helpful to come in here and actually edit these customization options, especially if you are going to use the email alert, because not only are you able to personalize how the reports look, but more importantly, I think at the very bottom, you're able to choose the size of the drawing, size of signature, and size of images for the reports and how they appear. So if you are including the drawing widget with a form, you may want to set it up so that that picture is set to large, so it's a little bit easier to see when you're looking at that HTML email report. So that's another best practice that we have, is making sure the company info is set up for you for the time zone, as well as for the report and PDF customization. And then the last one was the media configuration, which I just kind of hinted at. So if we come in here and we go into edit media configuration, this is where we're able to connect either our Dropbox or Box account. And once we do that, I can edit it to have my media storage set up, and I can actually customize the storage path that I want. What's also nice about connecting a Dropbox or Box account is if you plan on bringing in any images to the form itself, maybe you want to add a logo to the very top, or you want to add images to your option list, then connecting to Dropbox or Box will make that process much easier. So to go further with simplifying this account management, I strongly suggest that you create a way for your users to learn about iForm. And one way I suggest doing that is to actually create a form that instructs them on how to use iForm. So within iFormBuilder and within your form building, you're able to add attachment widgets, which can be MOV files or PDFs, and those can be accessible within a form itself. And so those are great instructional tools on how for your users to be able to get started with using iForm. I would almost use this as a checklist as well on what your users need to be made aware of for their data collection process. So the first thing is make sure that they're downloading the correct iForm app. Now, for Android devices, that's very simple. We only have one iForm app available. But on the iOS side of things, we actually have 3. So we have iForm, iForm ES, and iForm Kiosk. So you always want to make sure you're very specific to your users on which ones they should be downloading if you are an iOS user. If you didn't know about these other 2 apps that we have, iForm ES has an extra layer of security, and it does have compliance with HIPAA, FISMA, and so on. With the iForm ES, this password protection it essentially has a function where you can set up a timeout. So if the user hasn't been in the app for a while, they'll time out and they'll have to put the password back in. Or maybe they're collecting information on their iPhone and a phone call comes in, then they'll have to put their password in again before they can actually go and start collecting data. For iForm Kiosk, it is an awesome tool if you're ever going to trade shows, or if you're doing any kind of survey, or if you're doing an internal, let's say you're giving away prizes at an internal event, then setting up an iPad to be in kiosk mode will allow people to come up, put in their information, and then once they hit the done or submit button, it'll bring them back to a custom page that you're able to create and add images to. So it's a very unique experience. And these, you can use either iForm, iForm ES, or iForm Kiosk with any account level that you have. It just depends on what device you're using. So besides having them, making sure that they download the correct iForm app, also make sure that you instruct them on how to change and update the app preferences and settings within iForm. Now, some of us never go into these settings and preferences because we don't have a need for it, and because when you first download the iForm app, we actually configured those preferences for you. But if you do change these preferences, and some of these preferences include sync on start, auto sync, delete records, and also download records. So those different preferences can be configured, and for your project, if you have a standard, you want to make sure that your users are aware of the standards that you have put in place for those preferences and for those settings. Another simple thing to make sure your users are aware of is how to log in and out of the iForm app. Seems very simple and very silly to mention that, but because of our licensing model, it is important that they understand how that works so that they don't receive error messages when they go to try to collect data and they receive a message saying maximum number of licenses reached. You'll also want to show them how to delete unneeded records. So on iOS devices, it's as simple as seeing that record and then sliding left, and then you see the delete button. On Android devices, it's just holding your finger on the record that you see, and then a delete button will appear. Very simple, but a lot of times users aren't aware of that, and then they get overwhelmed with all the different records that they see on their device, and they're not sure which is needed and which was practice. So make sure they're aware of that as well. And then just talk to them about what the record status icons mean. And if you're not sure about the record status icons, here is the 5 that we have. And these, I would say the most important ones to recognize is when a record is only partially synced to the cloud. So if they see this bottom icon, knowing that means they have to try to reconnect and sync their device once they have better service. So improve your user management by granting the accurate user permissions, which we talked about. Sending notifications. I think notifications are something that can be extremely valuable to your users when it comes to just making them aware of different updates, or making sure even that they're aware of what time you guys are all having lunch. So something simple like that. When you're logged in to the iFormBuilder and you go under the Users tab, there's a section that says Notifications. And once you go into Notifications, you'll be able to see all the usernames that have logged into the device and captured a device license. And so this is where you can then send out a quick notification. And You can check all and then send the notifications to your users. Informing your users about this license model is also really important. We talked about how they can be locked out of the iFormBuilder system, so you want to make sure that that doesn't happen. For the user model, each username can be logged into up to 3 different devices at any given time. So that means I can log into my iPad, my iPhone, and maybe my tablet, but if I try to log into my Samsung and I don't log out of those other devices, that's when I receive the error message telling me maximum number of licenses reached, contact your company admin. So I want to avoid that at all times. So I want to make sure that my users know that if they are going to be changing devices, that they need to go into the iForm app and tap the log out button so that their license is then freed to be then accessible on another device. If at any time someone receives that error message and they don't have any of those other devices around to log out of, as a company admin, you can assist them by going under the training control panel and going under the company tab and where it says license. Once you're in there, you'll see where the username is that's using or consuming all of those licenses. Highlight the row and then click the delete button. And that will free up the licenses to be used on other devices.
With deleting the licenses, if you do delete a license, is that license then you cannot use the same license for 30 days? Is that correct?
So how the licensing works is if you delete a license, that will actually free up all 3 licenses for that user, free them back to the cloud. So then the user can now log into an additional 3 devices or some of the other devices that they were previously logged into. They can go into and put in their login credentials, and then they'll be using that license again. As far as the 30-day rule, as an admin, you cannot go back and go under the company section and license and delete that username again for another 30 days because we put that in place so that users are held accountable for how many devices they're logging into, and so that we don't give you as company admins the task of having to go in every single day because users are forgetting to log out. Does that answer your question, MJ?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Barrett.
Sure. So other ways to improve your form management besides just the form groups and the post data and the email alerts, we also have language localization and scoring. And I think as far as the language localization, it can be a huge asset to those projects that you may be deploying across the globe. So if I go under the Forms tab and I go into the localization section, this is where I'll see a list of all the different forms that I have in my account. If I select one of these forms and click the Edit button, I can now come in and choose any of these languages. And I'll just choose French here. And I can then add all the translations in French for these different fields. If I then turn my device and set it to the French language, and I look at my forms, I'll be able to see this specific form in French, which is really, really nice to be able to have that. And that actually assures that you're gathering better data, because if the form's in that individual's language, then they'll understand it a little bit clearer, hopefully. The other thing that's really nice about what localization does is if you're using an option list and you've set up your form in English, and then you've added maybe 3 or 4 different translations that your users will need. Every time that you include an option list in these forms, even if their device is set to a different language and they see that option list in their own native tongue, once the data comes back and hits the cloud, it's then going to be back in English again. So your option list data will always appear the same, so you have that consistency, which is really helpful and really nice. Other standards that you want to set for form building and for to simplify the account management is try to find and create form builder champions within your organization. And sometimes this may be the people you least expect it to be, but they're the individuals who really start to enjoy and like the form building process. I do suggest trying to have more than one champion. The reason for that being is 2 heads are better than 1. I may start creating a form and think that I've built out the perfect form and then talk to someone else and realize how much better it could be because of building a different kind of workflow. So having more than one person is a great asset. The other standard that we have is we want to make sure, or you want to make sure that your users who are building forms are always following the form building golden rules. The last thing we want to happen is for you to lose any of your data because somebody wasn't following the best practices and they ended up removing some of the fields and changing the input types, and all of a sudden your data is lost. So make sure that they're aware of those and that they're following them. Also, make sure that they're updating option lists using best practices. And when they're building the forms, they're using naming conventions. And lastly, they're cutting down on data entry because they're using smart controls. Two other suggestions that I have is that if you do have a dedicated database, I do suggest creating a form library. So you're able to have one whole company profile where you're building all your forms and you're testing it and it's your sandbox environment. And then once those forms are done, you can actually use form packages and package builder and package import to then share those forms with any of the other profiles that you have in your dedicated database. For those of you who don't have dedicated databases and you're interested in a similar workflow, you won't be able to share packages and have multiple accounts, but you can create form packages to share with other individuals who may have different accounts within iFormBuilder, and you can use form packages to actually take backups of your form structure. So let's say you're going to do a massive change to your forms, and you've already collected a lot of data with that initial one, but you're going to use best practices and you're going to make some updates to it. Before you start making those updates, it's always good to create a form package and then download that file and save it locally on your computer so that if anything were to happen, you have that as a resource and a reference, and then you can import it into your account again. So the next piece here is we want to make sure that we're able to assist you with increasing this productivity. So some of the ways that we suggest doing that is to use the Zerion software and iFormBuilder support, to make sure that you follow our release notes within our Zerion software Customer Success Center, to increase productivity with data integrations and the post URL and the custom workflows with the API. I think training is a huge part about customer success, and as a project manager, I think you should make sure that all of your users are using best practices and they're getting trained on the platform if they are going to be building forms or if you're handing over some of your company admin responsibilities. Documentation is also key for success with these projects. When you decided on naming conventions for your users and for your forms, make sure that everybody is aware of what those are so that you've set a standard in place for everyone to follow. And the last one that we have here is the Getting Started form. I mentioned this a little bit earlier for creating an instructional form for your users to start to understand how iForm works. But another piece of that is you can actually create a form that is used as a support tool. So as they're filling out a form, if they have a question on it, then they can go fill out another form for support, and they can tell you where they have questions or if they find a spelling error, and you can set that up to have an email alert, and you can be notified right away that they're having a question or they're having problems. So just giving your user as much support as possible within iForm itself. And talking about support, we have multiple support options available. We have ebooks, we have these live webinars, which thankfully you're a part of one today. We have different training resources, our certification program. We're always happy to help build projects, so we have different project services, and we have our Customer Success Center. All right, MJ, I think I filled up the amount of time, and I probably had way more that we could have talked about. But I want to thank everyone for joining us for this session. And before I let anyone go, MJ, are there any other questions?
Yes, Barrett, we just had one come in. Can you actually take Kevin off of mute so he could say his question?
Oh, sure. Hold on one second. All right, Kevin.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Yes, I got a question. I've been using this. This might be out of the realm of this course. Was hoping it did cover it and such. But when designing forms specifically, and you name them on the form level, so we have a question name, test, and the name itself for the table name would be test_1. Is there a report or a methodology or a way to dump out all of the form name and requirements and what they are, so you can sort of have like a design document? So we know that like question one, the text of it says enter the test date, but the table name is test, and is a date field that accepts date to this range, so to speak. Just so we have like documentation instead of manually creating that.
Sure, and that's a great question. Right now, with the way that our platform is set up, the best way to see what like the data column name is versus the label would it be actually to use the post URL and have it include the labels. And with that, oops, let me just jump over to a little screenshot I think I have in here for you. But this is where, with the post URL, you would be able to see the different, what the data column name is versus what the label is. Now, moving forward though, probably the best way to actually see those differences will be with our new form builder, because with the new form builder, you'll be able to see the data column name as well as the label, and in a setup that you're actually referencing. So almost like it looks like an Excel table, but you'll be able to see all of that information in our new form builder.
Is there a way I can test that and be early adopter?
We do actually have a form building beta testing program. So I will include that information with the follow-up email, and anyone else who's on this call who wants to be a beta tester would be happy to have you do that process. And that should be coming out in around between Q2 and Q3. I know we're in Q2 right now, but we should be seeing that relatively soon. And Kevin, where are you located?
The East Coast, Massachusetts specifically.
Okay, so if you can take the time, and if you weren't planning on it yet, hopefully you are now, to come to our Power User Summit, because we'll be showing off the new form builder there as well.
Okay. I'll see if I can do it.
That would be great. Well, thanks, Kevin. Are there any other questions, MJ?
No, Barrett, we're good.
So thank you, everyone, for taking the time out of your day today, and have a great rest of your day.